Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. Remarkable scenes in Las Vegas. Breaking news that both McLarens are getting disqualified from the Grand Prix, but not for the reasons that we initially thought. Max Verstappen crossed the line thinking that with winning the Grand Prix today, he had kept his outside championship hopes alive, but he had no idea when he crossed the line just how realistic those chances now appear based on what McLaren have managed to do today. Why has this happened? What is going on? What an absolute disaster class. So much to get into. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Understandably, given these developments, I've had to re-record the video, so the next 10 minutes or so recapping the race as I originally did, which is still relevant, and then towards the end we will discuss what these big changes have been. The race gets underway, 4 AM here in the UK, and this was a very interesting start. Immediately, Lando cuts across to cover off Max. Now, we've seen into turn 1 before. This is probably the one corner on the calendar that has the least grip of any corner. Certainly at the start of a race, relatively cold conditions, there's not going to be much grip, especially on the inside of turn 1. How many times have we seen drivers drive themselves off the track here? And yeah, it happened to Lando, but boy did it happen to basically everyone else behind as well. And Oscar Piastri, who's trying to mind his own business over here in the left-hand side, he finds himself in a real predicament because, as he said after the race, it felt like I was one of the only guys to actually try to make the corner, which, well, he did, but unfortunately the man on his inside did not. So Norris moves over very aggressively to cover Max on the inside. Now, I was actually very impressed by this at the time. Lando got a solid launch, not as good as Max, but it was a decent launch, and it was enough to just have enough room to cover off and cover him off. Now, I think Lando did absolutely the right thing here, because if Lando doesn't cover off the inside to Max, you know what happens, right? Max goes down the inside, he pushes Lando off the track. We've seen it a million times before with Charles Leclerc, for example, a couple of years ago as well. So Lando comes over to cover, but, well, Max just plays this very well. And I think Lando misjudged this to a certain degree. Again, people will look at this start as like, oh, it's a classic Lando start that he's been doing for the last couple of years, bottling the lead at the start, which is true. But at least he actually gave a fight, right? Like, he actually drove aggressively here today in this start. I don't think this is the same as what we've seen before with Lando being very slow away and very passive and just allowing Max a free rein through. He aggressively covered off Max, but again, Max was then literally half a meter behind him. Lando didn't really want to come off the accelerator and onto the brakes too early, maybe fearing that Max would ram into the back of him. Max, of course, he's Max Verstappen. He plays it very well. He dives slightly to the outside. You can see a small little front. It's either a front right little lock up here from Lando, or he's just on such a dirty part of the track. And he is very to the inside here, right? So he probably could have not squeezed Max quite that much. Like, he maybe had a bit more room that he could have played with here, because Max is probably not going to go down the inside of that gap on the right-hand side, but who knows. So anyway, Lando goes too deep. He finds himself off the track, and the switchback comes through for Max to take the lead of the race. And I think we said yesterday whoever was leading after lap 1 was probably going to win. This time that was going to be Max. If Norris had have been leading after lap 1, I'm still not sure he would have done. Overtaken pretty easy around here. Max has the new engine. I think the Red Bull was always going to be a faster car this weekend once they got the setup together in Max's hands than the McLaren. But the real problem with Lando then going very deep and off the track was that Russell was able to get the move done as well. But really the drama was further behind, especially for Oscar Piastri, because it really has been a disaster for him over the last few weeks. Of course, when you qualify on pole, then even if you do a Lando Norris and go too deep into turn 1 on the low grip inside conditions, you're still going to be second or third, right? Whereas if you're Oscar and you qualify 5th, you're open to getting, well, rammed from the inside, which is exactly what Liam Lawson does. So Russell has a little lockup. Again, there was less grip than people expected on the inside of that track turn 1 today. Russell has a little lockup. Lawson then has a big lockup and just smashes into the side of Piastri. he wasn't even the worst offender. The worst offender was Gabriele Bortoleto, who you can see right here, who does a Kimi Antonelli in Austria, or like a Bottas in Turkey, or in Hungary, sorry, and just absolutely sends it down the inside. I don't know what he was thinking, to be honest. And you can see the drama here, like poor Lance Stroll gets clattered. This is Leclerc going off the track because of everything that was happening on the inside. So it was all sorts of a mess at the start. This was Bortoleto just so out of control, and I've actually not seen yet, but they were going to investigate this after the race. I'd be pretty shocked, because he had to retire because of this, if he doesn't have a place penalty to carry forward to next weekend. This is what happens. So Bortoleto, I mean, yeah, he was aggressive, that's for sure. He goes to the inside, and yeah, he just had way too much speed, completely clatters into Stroll, that clatters into the Alpine, they all go round, and yeah, it's race over for basically all of them. This, though, was Liam Lawson's on board. So, again, you know, he's pretty aggressive. I think what you will note, I mean, very aggressive. What you will note here is that this is Piastri on the right-hand side. So, what is this? Is this the entry to the corner? Does he have the right to this corner? Because people are looking at this in a similar way to Piastri. He got a 10-second penalty for hitting Antonelli last time out in Brazil. Lawson's gone down the inside, kind of similar scenario, and yeah, Russell's had a bit of a lock-up here, but he's taken too much speed in, and he just clatters into Piastri and, well, takes a load of front-wing damage himself. But yeah, it's like Lawson was very much out of control here, had a big lock-up himself, hits Piastri, and apparently that's fine. So I think that's what I was confused about, really, is that, well, I know that they tend to give a bit of leeway for turn 1, lap 1, but I'm not exactly sure of the justification there, because Lawson looked to me like he was pretty much out of control. It didn't seem that he was entitled to the space based on the racing guidelines, and somehow he gets away with it. And Piastri after the race was like, yeah, not so sure about these racing regs, when he got away with that somehow, and it did compromise Piastri's race quite substantially, pushed him further back the grid. The other big drama was on Antonelli. So he moved before the start. Now, well, when they showed this on the rebroadcast, it didn't really look like he had. It looked like he just drove away, but he did very marginally roll forwards before the start began. So it is going to be a 5-second penalty. I mean, when they showed us the replay, they should have done so in slow-mo or whatever. So yeah, unfortunate. But Antonelli, look, you could give Max driver of the day, justified. I think Antonelli was the driver of the day. What he did today was absolutely sensational. His last few Grand Prix have been extremely impressive, and I'm even more excited for next year now than I already was. So, Max takes the lead, Lando's down to 3rd, Sainz holds on to 4th. This is the way that the grid looks further back at that point. Then there's a yellow flag, of course, for all the drama that happened back at turn 1, that shortly after becomes a virtual safety car, but not before this. So, this is the other drama. This is turn 1. You've got Max, you've got Russell, Norris, all heading down here, the start-finish straight. You've got a ton of double-waved yellows, of course. But yet again, we saw this in Mexico when there was marshals on the track. And look, if there's going to be a marshal on the track to clean something up, it's, you know, it's meant to be VSC, right? There's a reason why the VSC was flown at the end of Mexico when Sainz pulled into the pits or whatever. Like, he was trying to get off the track, right? Back at the stadium section. They had to bring marshals out to wheel the car away, so they had to throw the VSC. I don't know where the miscommunication was here, but to have all of these marshals running onto the track with no VSC and just double yellows is, yeah, again, it's an absolute disaster, right? Because, like, in case anything happens, it could have been really bad. Like, that's obviously a sizable runoff area. But yeah, you should never really be having images like this. So again, a couple of races ago, more key questions. Then they throw the VSC to clear up a couple of things. By the time the marshals have got out of the way, just to maybe show that, oh, well, yeah, they probably should have done that. But after all the dust had settled, Max, Russell, Norris, Sainz, Hadjar, Piastri was under investigation for the Lawson thing, but obviously, well, he was never going to get a penalty for that. Hamilton was already up to 12th, so he'd had a great start. There was loads of drama further back. And also, under the VSC, Mercedes had decided to pit Antonelli for the hard tyres. Now, last year, this was a 2-stop race. The feeling was it was going to be another 2-stop race. Again, Pirelli, I don't know what they've done with their compounds this year, but what an absolute disaster, right? Like, it is now, it was very interesting what it meant, but the fact that a hard tyre was like clearly the best tyre was extremely interesting, and the fact that there was basically no degradation, there was deg, but there was not enough to make it worthwhile. So Antonelli went for the hard tyre on lap 3, so on lap 2, lap 3. So he had 48, 47 laps to do on that hard tyre, but I think many of us thought, okay, it's probably going to be a 2-stop at this point, so they might go hard with Antonelli. That seems like a reasonable approach. But no, he, well, managed to do somewhat better than that. So Russell then really was putting the pressure on Max at this point. He actually gave it a pretty good go, got within a couple of tenths of making the move happen. So early on the mediums, Norris was dropping off the pace. It looked like, okay, yeah, Norris has lost the lead here, but he doesn't have the pace to get back regardless. That would change as the race went on, but then after a few laps, you know, the tyres for Russell weren't going to be in the same spot. He was suffering with like a steering issue that he had before in qualifying as well, so that challenge faded. I think it's also very clear that the regulations are now so mature, you can't race very well in these regs, right? Like, even around this circuit where there's so much opportunity with a massive strip to make an overtake happen, the ability of the cars to stay close and keep their tyres in the right window, it is just a bit of a nightmare in the way that the regulations have developed. This was lap 10. Antonelli was in 15th at this point, trying to make some moves happen. Hamilton was trying to get past Ocon, but that was proving to be a serious challenge. Leclerc had made some progress, and eventually he did get past Piastri because of a Piastri big lockup, actually we'll get to in a second. Antonelli was then under investigation. Hamilton was told to lift and coast, even though it was cold, so, you know, it is what it is. Who is shocked at this point with that fry? We'll get back to them in the coming minutes. This was Piastri losing that place to Leclerc because he had a lockup going into the end of the second sector, and at the start of the straight, Leclerc then had the opportunity to make the move happen. Big wing on Leclerc's car after what he tried for qualifying yesterday, so he was not particularly quick in the straights, but with DRS open it was just enough to get that move done, and then that opened up Leclerc to make a move further up the field, but that's certainly not how it would stay. Piastri eventually got past Isaac Hadjar as well. Max is then leading by a couple of seconds. Norris is a few seconds further back than that. This was also a notable moment. Hamilton and Albon had a bit of a clash. Hamilton was locking up as well as Piastri did into that tricky corner before the Las Vegas strip. Albon just ran into the back of him, destroyed his front wing, and well, we saw Hamilton get a penalty for this back in Brazil, so it's pretty inevitable. The same thing was going to be happening with Alex Albon. That then gets noted. The VSC gets pulled out because there actually was more debris on track that needed to be dealt with. Antonelli by this time had got his official 5-second penalty, but it still looked like he was very much so out of the running. Norris was then told, okay, time to pick up the pace. Russell got out of the way. He went into the pits, but already we're lap 18. Last year, I think it was lap 9 that Charles Leclerc came into the box. So it was very clear that the one stop was absolutely on. Whether the one stop was on for Antonelli, I think, was the big question, right? It was talked about kind of halfway through the race, and Zach Brown was, well, he didn't think it was possible. I thought, Zach, do you not understand Pirelli? Like, it's definitely possible. It's definitely doable. The fact that Antonelli made it work as well as he did, I thought was pretty stunning, actually. So Lando was giving it a go to close into Max, but in the end, that was not going to happen. Alex got that 5-second penalty as well. Hamilton, I mean, this I thought was a pretty funny comment. Hamilton comes on the radio and says, "How am I so slow?" And Darby says, "We're just getting started." It was a funny comment, really. I think kind of what he means is, all right, Hamilton, you make good progress. You know, we're still getting started in the race here. Like, let's keep this up. And then the next stint, we're going to really push for some higher places. But it kind of reads like, don't worry, Lewis, we're just getting started, right? Like, yeah, the car's pretty terrible, but just you wait, right? Things are only going to get worse from here. So Piastri comes into the box. Lando comes into the box a couple of laps after that. He then, you know, comes out behind George Russell again after Russell hit a pretty big undercut. I will just quickly mention the TV direction today was pretty atrocious, actually. This was quite a critical moment. Lap 26, Max's pit. He's got not a quick stop, a 3.0. Russell was 21.5 seconds behind at this point, and the pit stop loss here is about 21 seconds. So it looked like it was going to be really tight at the pit exit, which, to be fair, it was, but we never got to see any of it at all because they were watching a Williams for some unbeknown reason. So yeah, I don't know what the TV direction was cooking up today. Even at the end of the race when Lando was having his issue, we had no idea that it was happening apart from like the commentators telling us and looking at the board, because we never saw his car at all in that whole period. This was interesting. He was told to box opposite Sauber. The Sauber didn't box, but he stayed out anyway. So they were trying to make a move on Hulkenberg. That never happened. Hamilton eventually came into the pits, put on a set of mediums, probably a little earlier than he might have liked. He was on the radio saying that the brakes as well were being a bit of an issue. Lando then had much more pace than Russell in the second stint. Very interesting that Russell's pace was absolutely non-existent on the hard tyre towards the end. It may have been that he was really pushing the compound hard early, probably what it was, to try and give it a go on Max over those first couple of laps, and after which point his tyres were fundamentally compromised. But Antonelli was catching Russell on about 25 lap older tyres, hand over fist. Lando then gets into second place, which again, Piastri was really stuck, and then it was funny because Lando was told to come and get Max, and GP relayed that to Max and said Lando's been told to come and get you, knowing exactly what Max's response would be, and that response was to put in a couple of purple sectors and purple laps. So realistically at this point the win was never on. But the battle then was very interesting because Russell had like no pace at this point at all. Piastri had, to be fair, done a decent job. Not like he was quick, but at least until this point he'd done a solid job of a recovery given what had happened at the start. And it looked inevitable, really, that he would manage to get past Antonelli, no? Because, Kimi on 40-odd lap-old hard tyres, relatively fresh ones for Oscar. Leclerc was then further back. It looked like, okay, this is Mercedes' best attempt. They leave Antonelli out. They take the 5-second penalty at the end, but at least they might hold on to 8th or something like that. But no, Kimi did a phenomenal job defending, and there was a couple of moments where Piastri really did give it a good go. But yeah, Antonelli's defence was just sensational, and you expected him to have to defend lap after lap, but he managed it very well. The tyres, again, of Piastri were, not in a great spot because he's stuck in the dirty air. The McLaren doesn't love the dirty air. Leclerc had a bigger rear wing, so he wasn't going to have an easy time overtaking. But for Antonelli to hold on the way that he did, I think especially impressive was the fact that he actually pulled a gap at the ends and managed to stay ahead of Leclerc. It looked for some time that he was probably going to lose position to Sainz. You can see Sainz in the background here, but and Leclerc is there, but he's just hiding, I think, behind Piastri's car in this shot. But it looked like he was going to lose that position too, but that's not what happened. So everything was winding down over the last couple of laps, but then Lando's gap started to be raised quite substantially. It was going from 5 to 6 to 7, and he was losing half a second a corner, it felt like, and clearly there was some sort of issue. The commentators eventually picked up on it. We never really got to see his car. The race direction decided not to do that, so we just had to guess. I wanted to see Lando's car. Has he got front wing damage? Has he hit the wall? Is his suspension broken? What's going on? But we never got to see it, so we never really knew until we heard reports over the radio, not even from Lando himself, but it was reported to basically Crofty commentary that Lando was saving fuel. So we know that the teams at the end of the Grand Prix, they have to submit a 1 litre fuel sample to the FIA, and the teams tend to underfuel because it's quicker to actually lift and coast with less fuel than it is otherwise, and they were a little bit marginal on that, so they decided that they've got loads of gap to Russell behind, they're going to manage it right. And immediately when this happened, it looked like a major concern. Max, of course, eventually went on to win the race. Norris was only about 3 seconds ahead of Russell in the end, but it didn't feel like McLaren were too concerned about this. It was like, all right, well, it doesn't matter if Max wins by 5 seconds or 20, we're still going to get the 18 points regardless. Might as well play it safe on fuel, and it is what it is. So it didn't seem like McLaren were that concerned about that. In fact, Andreas Seller after the race was very confident that they'd managed things perfectly well. Max, Lando, Russell, Piastri, Antonelli, again, brilliant job finishing off what was a sensational drive ahead of Charles Leclerc in the end for Sainz, Hadjar, Hulkenberg and Hamilton rounding things out. So the immediate reaction was, okay, probably there could be an issue on fuel, but it looks like it's okay for McLaren. But all of a sudden, there were some other questions being raised because you had Nicholas Tombazis from the FIA in the garage with both of the McLarens. And this was more than the fuel issue. And immediately the reaction was there were lots of, Piastri fans being like, oh my God, Lando might get disqualified. This is great for Oscar in the championship. He'd be still at 381. Lando would be at 390, very much all to play for. But it quickly became clear that actually there's more to this. And it did feel like Norris after the race. Certainly there were some shots of Norris and Andrea Stella and some feelings that actually, hang on a second here, there might be some serious problems. These were the standings as they looked. Max would be 42 points behind with 2 races to go, which feels pretty much unassailable. But Lando was doing some interviews and was like, look, I don't know what's going on right now. I'm just here doing interviews while they experiment on the car. So Andrea Stella, he postponed his media commitments because there were problems with what was initially considered to be Norris's McLaren, but quickly became clear that it could well be something else, right? Because this did not strike me as a fuel issue, because if they couldn't provide the sample, then they couldn't provide the sample. It is what it is. But to close the garages up and get everyone in there to be doing checks or tests or whatever, you know, it pointed to me towards plank wear, right? And I actually was reminded when I saw this about what I had seen earlier in the race, which was this. You guys may even remember when Piastri was making this move on Isaac Hadjar. It did strike me that, wow, there were a lot of sparks there. Like, he hit the grounds pretty hard, right? So he's obviously running that McLaren very close to the ground. Didn't really think too much more about it at the time, until then we see the following technical delegates report. The skid wear of cars numbers 84 and 04 were checked. This is what happened to Ferrari back in China. The rearmost skid was measured on both cars. The measured thickness was less than 9 millimeters on both cars, which is the minimum thickness required. I refer this matter to the stewards for their consideration. This, I mean, almost certainly by the time this video is going live, if not shortly after, will be a slam dunk disqualification for both McLarens. There is a 10mm thickness. If it goes down to 9, it's okay. If it goes anywhere below 9, that is a disqualification. They ran the car too low. The McLaren mechanics, they set the car up poorly this weekend. And as a result, in the same way that Ferrari did back in China, they're getting both of their boys disqualified. And after what looked to be a great result today for Lando in the context of the championship, all of a sudden, it's terrible for Oscar. He's probably going to be tied with Max Verstappen on points. And it ain't good for Lando either. Max all of a sudden goes from a 49-point deficit to a 24-point deficit with 2 rounds and a sprint left and a fresher engine. So that's how it currently appears. As of recording this, they are just about to speak to the stewards, but whenever I've seen a report like this before, it's a slam dunk disqualification, and we thought it was about the fuel. It was actually about the plank wear. McLaren have cocked up immensely, and all of a sudden, Max will be licking his lips. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.